family and friends. He attended Indiana University, and friendships with Taiwanese students led him to live primarily in Taiwan since 1990. In Taiwan, Scott had a 15-year career as an investment banker, and he is now semi-retired and enjoys travel and bird watching. Scott joined the Rotary Club of Taipei. I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Taipei.
Taipei. He joined the club in 2006, and after briefly staying in the Philippines, he returned to Taiwan in 2018 for a part-time position with the Taiwan Tourism Bureau, and he also joined our club. So good morning, Scott. You can take it away.
Hey, good morning, Madam President, and thank you very much. It's good to see everyone. Yes, 8 a.m. here in Taiwan, so we're doing okay. And it's a pretty nice morning. Just we need more rain here, but unlike Northwest Ohio, where we've been having more of a drought. But today I'd like to just introduce everyone Taiwan. And first question, I guess, is if I can do this correctly, is where is Taiwan? Okay. So here we are. Yeah, the circle, I have to work on my circling, but you can see we're a fairly large island to the west, to the east of China. And then below us is the Philippines, above us is South Korea and Japan. So we're quite centrally located right in East Asia. And we're about 1/3 the size of Ohio, but the population is 23 million, so about twice that of Ohio. So we're smaller, but more people than you would find in Ohio. And let's see, I'm gonna try to go back, okay. And then here's, can you see, yes, okay. So here's Taiwan. And what I'm gonna do today is take you on a tour around Taiwan, starting up here in the north. And then we're gonna go down the east coast. As you can see, there's mountains in the middle of Taiwan. So you generally go around Taiwan. And then the East Rift Valley, which is, you have the Central Mountain Range and the Coastal Mountain Range. It goes between those. And then we take a turn around and up the West Coast, and a few of the islands we'll be visiting as well. So I hope this can give you a good idea of what Taiwan is and who we are and the history as well as the culture. So all the pictures are pictures that I've taken, especially the last couple of years. I've done lots of traveling in Taiwan, and we aren't able to leave. We haven't had any community cases of the COVID, but we're hard to leave Taiwan because to come back, there's a lot of restrictions if you're coming into the country. So I've had a lot of chances to travel inside Taiwan, especially the last year. So let me go back to shared screen. Okay, here we go. And then hopefully I can. So how do I change the slides then? How do I move the slide, advance the slide? Okay.
You might have to reshare your screen and select whatever your the application that you're using is in.
Okay. There, okay, can you see it? No.
Nope, just maybe hit share screen again.
Okay. Now?
No, not yet.
Okay.
There we go. It's still Taiwan though.
Yeah, how to move it forward. Oh, I can manually do it. Okay. That works. Okay, so here's Taiwan, the map I was showing you. So as you can see, actually the highest mountain in Taiwan is higher than Mount Fuji in Japan. So we have a fairly high mountains in the middle. We're a volcanic island. The Tropic of Cancer runs right about through the middle of Taiwan. So where we'll go to first, okay, well, also the very friendly people. I think that's a key part of Taiwan. So this is 2010, the Rotary meeting. I was the chairman of the English speech contest, and there's the president to the left there, and lots of other good members. And then here's last week, William and myself and another member under the Toastmaster meetings. First time we met, but we both were members of the same Toastmasters Club as well as the same Rotary Club. So hello, William. If I make any mistakes today, William is supposed to correct me immediately. Okay. So going up north, Taipei, where I live, is formed on the Danshui River. And if you go up north toward the port there, this is the old British embassy. And they put these flags out. These are all the countries and people that have controlled this particular part of Taipei right at the port here. And it shows you how many times Taiwan has changed hands over the years. So the two flags that are shown, first, the Aboriginal people have been here many years. They were the first ones, and the Aboriginal people now who are here mostly would be related to the Polynesian people, and some of the older groups in the Philippines, for example. And then the Portuguese sailed around the mid-16th century, and they called it Formosa, which means beautiful, or it did in the old Portuguese. And so the Isla Formosa means, beautiful island. Is another name for Taiwan is Formosa. And then if you look way at the end, the Dutch and the Spanish were really the first ones to come here. The Dutch set up a fort for the Dutch East India Company, and the Spanish then came and set up a fort here in the north of Taipei, where this place is. The Dutch then kicked out the Spanish. So the Dutch ran Taiwan for quite a long time. And then they kicked out the Spanish in 1642. But then there was upheaval in China. The Ming dynasty fell to the Qing dynasty, and a general and his ships from the Ming dynasty came to Taiwan and kicked out the Dutch and set up a government here on Taiwan for quite a long time. So it was kind of a remnant of the Ming dynasty ran Taiwan for a while. Then eventually the Qing dynasty came and kicked out those Ming dynasty rebels. So the yellow flag is the Qing dynasty. And then during the Opium Wars, 1880s, the British, one of the parts of the treaty was that this Danshui would become a treaty port. So it's really run by the British. They controlled it, and they had a lot of power in Taiwan at that time. Then in 1895, the next flag is Japan. There was the second Sino-Japanese War, and the Treaty of Shimonoseki, the Qing dynasty ceded Taiwan to Japan. So from 1895 to 1945, Taiwan was run by Japan as a colony. And then the end of World War II, that's Australia and America. There was a transition period. And eventually Taiwan was given over to the Republic of China under Chiang Kai-Shek. But as I think we may know, in 1949, the Chinese Civil War, Chiang Kai-Shek was kicked out of mainland China. And so he really became the head of Taiwan, which was formerly just a part of China. So our official name is still the Republic of China, although most people wouldn't consider us China. People would also call it Free China in the old days. So that's still the official name, but Taiwan is the more common name. And if you look at sporting events, because China doesn't like Taiwan to call itself Taiwan, our official name is usually Chinese Taipei. So we go by many different names, but that's who we are. Okay. And heading down to Taipei, this is Taipei 101. For a while, it was the tallest building in the world. Now it's still in the top 10. And that's in eastern Taipei. And that's the city I live in. There's about 7 million people. And but I personally prefer the older part of town. So here's a map of the old walled city of Taipei. By 1884, the Qing dynasty completed a wall around. They created this new area, created the capital. And it was actually the last walled city built by the Qing dynasty before it collapsed in 1911. But this was the shape. It's not in a north-south configuration because it's pointing towards Backing Mountain, which is in the distance up to the northeast. That's a traditional way of doing it. But a good way to learn about Taipei is to walk around the old wall. So here's what the North Gate used to look like back in the day, back from what the Qing dynasty built. And here it is today. It's the best preserved of all the 5 gates that were built on the wall. And there's a lot of information about the walled city around this gate. So this is, again, the old part of town, the little port, the gates would each generally lead to one of the population centers around Old Taipei, and the interior of the city is more for government use. And here's the Little South Gate, another one of the, has been more modified recently, but it's still one of the gates that was there. And that leads to the Taipei Botanical Garden, which is one of the very beautiful parts of Taipei. We have many parks. I think one strong point of Taiwan is lots of parks. So this was built by the Japanese. They built several botanical gardens in Taiwan, trying to grow different products and learn about how to grow things in this really subtropical, tropical type of climate. And here's the Taipei Botanical Garden, really a beautiful little place. And lots of animals, birds, butterflies, as you can see, and moths and other types of animals. And here's the headquarters of the Taiwan Alcohol Tobacco Monopoly Bureau. So it was a big fundraiser, and still is a big fundraiser for the government. And in the old days, they sold medicinal opium and beer and cigarettes and anything they could raise money with. And they still have a strong position in the beer and cigarette market in Taipei. But this building was built during the Japanese era, and it's very close to the finance ministry, not by coincidence, because it was very closely related to the government finances. And here's the Taipei, the presidential building, again, built by Japan in 1919. It was the Governor General's offices at that time, and now it's the presidential building. So beautiful building, wonderful place to visit. And so this is where the president works. And here's the interior. Again, wonderful building to visit if you have a chance to come to Taipei. And there's our president on the right, Ms. Tsai Ing-wen. She was elected 2 times, so she's still the president. And the premier is the guy on the old premier on the left. So she's the head of state, and the premier is the head of the government. And you can take your picture with them. Okay. And here's Sun Yat-sen, again in the presidential building. So Taiwan's history is pretty complicated. The father of the country is considered to be Sun Yat-sen. He established, or was the first president of the Republic of China in 1911 when the Qing dynasty fell. But he had already passed away by the time Taiwan became a part of China. So it's a little confusing, but he's still considered the father of the country. And here across the street is the called the Taipei Guest House now. This was the residence of the Japanese governor during the Japanese colonial era. This is where he lived. He just walked across the street to go to his offices, very convenient. And also just across from the presidential building, this is the Chiang Kai-Shek Memorial. I don't know if you all remember Chiang Kai-Shek. Anyway, he ran Taiwan, and depending on how old you were, you might be more familiar with his name, but he was president of Taiwan from until he passed away in the mid 1970s. And we have lots of parks, and I think one good thing about Taiwan is people gather in parks. There's a lot of socializing in Taiwan. So the older people can gather and play. This is an erhu that this man is playing and sing, and you'll see people dancing. So really, I think more so than in the US, people will socialize in the public spaces quite a bit. It's a very social country, a very friendly country. Oops. And this is not too far from my house. So there's lots of wetlands and rice fields. So rice is obviously a major product of Taiwan. So beautiful areas you can go walking just within the urban area. This would still be considered urban Taipei. And here's a Swinhoe's white-eyed bird, very nice one, recently took, and a Taiwan barbet. So lots of beautiful birds in Taipei. So if we head back up toward the Danshui River, again, here's some fishermen. It's also a good place for birding, but you can see the old and the new kind of mixing together is the buildings of Taipei. As I said, 7 million people in Taipei City, so everyone has to live somewhere. And here's an osprey carrying home its lunch. So if you go up across the north coast, this is the northernmost tip of Taiwan. It's the Fugui Lighthouse, but the train doesn't go that far, but this is the northernmost point, and there's our flag. And so here's a map of the railway system for Taiwan. You can see it doesn't go up to the very tip of the north or the south, but we'll get back on the train now and Taipei, and then we'll head east toward the northeast coast there, if you can see it. And one of the places there's several tourist lines. So this is the Pingshi Rail line. It was built to provide coal. Taiwan is a big coal country up in its northeast. And Keelung, the city up that way, was a big place for people to refuel as they would be sailing around with coal for their ships. So now it's a tourist train. You can take it deep down into Taiwan's old coal country. So it's a kind of rainy, dark area in general, but here's the river, the Keelung River, that goes all the way from this coal country all the way to Taipei City. It meanders all along the north of Taiwan. And you can walk around and discover this is an older part of Taipei, Taiwan, obviously. And here's a statue in Hotong, honoring the coal miners who played a big role in the development of Taiwan. Very difficult work, as you can imagine. There's lots of museums about the coal mining. So if you keep going beyond there, all the way to the east coast, here's a temple. This is Taiwan's religions. The main religion would be Buddhism and Taoism, usually mixed together, often in the same temple. So they'd be like elaborate types of temples like this. Confucianism, you could say, is a kind of religion or a philosophy, would be second. So here, as I noted, there's mountains. One issue about Taiwan is there's always how to get through the mountains. So the east side of Taiwan is separated from the west by mountains that go right into the ocean. So you have to build tunnels to go through the mountains. And here's the tunnel to go from the north part of Taiwan into what we call the Yilan Plain on the east coast. So now we're starting to head down the coast. This is an old railway tunnel that's converted to bicycle use. So you can bicycle from under the mountains, and it's a very nice bicycle trail. And once you get to the other side is a beautiful coastline. You can see the mountains coming right down into the sea. In the old days, this was very difficult to get over. Next week, I'll be going right to this area to learn more about the Qing dynasty's development of the Yilan Plain, which is where we're heading now. This is the alluvial plain on the east coast of Taiwan. And the train goes pretty close to the ocean here. So it's a nice train ride. There's Turtle Island in the back, out there at the sea, one of Taiwan's offshore islands. And in Yilan City itself, the east coast was quite empty when Japan arrived in 1895. So there's more evidence of Japanese presence in Taiwan for those 50 years. So here's a cultural building in downtown Yilan. But there are lots of wetlands. I learned mostly about it from birding expeditions with my friend. We drive down to Yilan and do some bird watching. Very friendly people down there. Here's black-winged stilts. So they're fairly well, hopefully it won't develop too fast, because there is development underway that's concerned over what it does to the wetlands. But so far, this is still a very important migration point also for birds going from Philippines up through to Russia. They'll stop at Yilan. And here's the Yilan Center for Traditional Arts, Chinese arts, Taiwanese arts, both. Then you have more mountains to get through. Once you get up to the southern part of the plain, more mountains. This is the Taroko Gorge. You're entering Hualien, which is even more isolated place because there are so many mountains around it and the Pacific Ocean facing to the east. So it's a beautiful area. There's a lot of marble deposits here. Hualien was very famous for marble. And I just visited there a couple weeks ago. So did some research on the Japanese immigrant villages of Hualien. So here's a campaign poster for an Aboriginal candidate. We have seats set aside in the legislature for Aboriginal representation. So that's his name in Chinese, but also in the local Ami language, which you don't see very often, but you'll see it sometimes in Hualien. So here's the candidate from the Ami tribe. And then they've done a lot of work lately on recovering the history of the Japanese development of Hualien area in particular, because that's where they were very active. So here's two soldiers guarding the bridge to the Shinto shrine, main shrine in Hualien in those days, and now it's a martyr shrine for Taiwan martyr shrine. And here's a picture of a Japanese immigrant lady with their children. So they were brought in, people were invited to sell all their possessions in Japan, the farmers, and they set up villages in eastern Taiwan, which were relatively less populated, to try to farm them. And that's what they did for the next 30 years. If you keep going down, Hualien is really at the northern end of the East Rift Valley. So you keep going down, you enter Tai Zhong County, and here's Chiang, which is that's the central mountain range. On that side, on the other, to the back of the picture would be the coastal mountain range. And it's a beautiful area. The train goes through the valley. It doesn't go along the coast. So here's the rice fields that just go on forever. Beautiful, in my opinion, the most beautiful part of Taiwan is around here in Jirshan, in the East Rift Valley. So people enjoy taking pictures jumping in the air. So you'll see a lot of that going on. And here's my bicycle, electric bicycle, very beautiful area. And as you can see, a great place for photographs. I love this area. Okay. People pretending like they're harvesting rice. And then if you keep heading down the East Rift Valley, you get Tai Zhong back to the ocean again. So here's this is a very isolated part of Taiwan, southern end basically on the East Coast. But they have some nice parks there. Here's some lanterns for the temples. And here's a jet fighter. Particularly on the East Coast, you'll see lots of the Air Force, or Republic of China Air Force, protecting us from China in particular as our main rival. So the East Coast is more protected than the West Coast and less populated. So they have lots of Air Force bases there. So you head down to the southern tip of Taiwan, you turn right toward the West Coast. At the very bottom of the West Coast, here's Ponghu Bay, still also a fairly isolated part of Taiwan. And here's a beautiful gate with gold leaf at Ponghu Bay. Heading up the coast, you come into Gaochong, which used to be the second largest city of Taiwan. Now it's the third largest. There's some Coast Guard cutters and the Love River. Gaochong, big producer of steel, petrochemicals. It's the big industrial town of Taiwan, especially in the old days, but still is these days. Railroad yards, a lot of conversion to parks. So as I said, there's a lot of places for people to go and spend some time with their families. And if you come to Taiwan, I think one of my most favorite things is to go watch just the families enjoying themselves on a Saturday afternoon. And lots of good transportation systems in Gaochong in particular. Here's the new light rail system. They've got metro system as well. So this is at the old train station. A lot of history that they've gone through, again, part of the war. This was a very big naval base for the Japanese Imperial Navy. So it was bombed very heavily during World War II. There weren't any battles on Taiwan, but lots of Taiwan was bombed during the war, but particularly Gaochong because it was such a big naval base. And here's the beautiful lighthouse that guards the entrance to Gaochong Harbor. Gaochong is the busiest harbor for Taiwan, so a lot of the products that you see made in Taiwan probably were shipped out of the Gaochong Harbor by this lighthouse. And here's the Lotus Lake a bit farther north, people practicing the dragon boat racing, which is a popular event here, and pagodas along the lake. And the high-speed rail, the West Coast has its high-speed rail system. So this is Gaochong is the end station. Here's the nice little trains you can take from Gaochong to Taipei very quickly now. Heading further up the coast on the West Coast, Tainan, and here's a B&B. One good thing about Taiwan lately is lots of B&Bs being developed, so very easy to stay in places before that didn't have hotel service. Now you can stay in nice houses like this and visit the local areas. So this is a gentleman, Yoichi Hatai, very famous in the Tainan Jiayi area on the West Coast because we're always struggling for water in Taiwan. We don't have any large natural lakes and the water just runs into the ocean. So one of the big projects for the Japanese was irrigation and reservoir construction, and he was the main person who built the largest reservoir in Asia at the time, Ushanti Reservoir. So he's quite famous in this part of the area. Here's a statue to him. He didn't want a very honorable statue, just sitting and trying to figure out his next problem, engineering problem, and how to sort it out for the reservoir construction. Unfortunately, he died during World War II. His ship was sunk by torpedoes. And here's the reservoir that he built, the Ushanti Reservoir. He also built many other things in Taiwan. And that turned Taiwan's West Coast into a very productive rice growing region. Before it was a very dry area. And this is also used for electricity generation, of course, as well, hydraulic energy. So moving further up the coast is Jiayi. Here's a Confucian temple. You can see it's much simpler than the Buddhist, Taoist types temples. So you'll see these around Taiwan as well. And from there, you can go up into the mountains. The train lines generally go around Taiwan, but again, they built some trains to go up for harvesting wood, as I mentioned before, coal. But here, this is for harvesting of wood. It's the Alishan Forestry Railway. So this can take you up into the mountains in a very nice way. And you're getting higher and higher. Here's another picture from Funchihu up in the mountains of Taiwan. And a rusty laughing thrush. You'll see different types of birds, obviously, at the higher elevations than you will at the lower elevations. And if you go further north, there's another line that, again, primarily used for harvesting of lumber. One of Taiwan's biggest products was camphor. We were one of the largest exporters of camphor for many years, so including for use of making film. So Charlie Chaplin's films probably recorded on camphor-based film from Taiwan. And here's the Sun Moon Lake from the Jiji line. This is the biggest lake in Taiwan. Again, a reservoir built during the Japanese era primarily, which also used for a lot of electricity production. So it's a very high in the mountain type of lake. Here's Tai Zhong, now the second largest city of Taiwan. And the old Japanese train station was preserved to the right. On the left is the new station, so they're side by side. And it's become a wonderful city to visit. It's a sprawling place, but it's become much better in terms of tourism lately. Here's the old Taiwan sugar. We have lots of sugar in Taiwan. So they've converted this factory into a park for people, and it's in Taichung City, very close to the train station. And here's the old Taichung City Hall built during the Japanese era. Beautiful building. And Taichung Park, those pavilions, when they opened the Taichung train station during the Japanese era, they were having dignitaries from Japan, and they constructed these small villas for them to stay in on the lake while they were visiting Taiwan, and they're still there today. Okay, it's from Taichung. If you go to the west of us, we do have some outward islands, offshore islands. So at the bottom with the arrow is Ponghu. It's also called the Pescadores. You may have heard of that. But the one I just went to is Kinmen on the left side towards Xiamen. So you can see China is outside that circle. Taiwan's island is inside that circle. You can see that's our close, it's very militarily sensitive place. And there have been a couple of battles there, but it's a very interesting place to visit. And it's still very close to China. So the Taiwan Strait is basically controlled by Taiwan. But lately, China's been sending in lots of planes, doing incursions into our airspace, which is creating more tension. So here's Kinmen, the old buildings there. That pagoda has been there since the Qing dynasty. It's been repaired, but the location has been there. Old paintings of the Qing dynasty, you can see that pagoda was there already hundreds of years ago, a few hundred years ago. Here's me in part of the old town of Jinmen. Used to be a very wealthy place, and a islet off just that you can walk to at low tide, but not at high tide. The statue on the left is Kushinga, the person who defeated the Dutch that I mentioned before, the Ming Dynasty general. He assembled his fleet here in Jinmen before he went to Taiwan to kick out the Dutch. And he was really created a hero by Chiang Kai-Shek during that time. And there were a couple of battles in Jinmen, 1958. I don't know if you're old enough, but if you remember the Nixon Kennedy debates in 1960, they were talking about Quemoy and Amoy and the battles there in 1958. So this is where it happened. There was air battles and as well as mostly artillery battles. So this is the Victory Arch celebrating the defense of Kinmen in 1958 from the Chinese invasion or attacks. And they kept bombing Kinmen until the 1970s, until Mao Zedong passed away. But there was also an amphibious invasion of Kinmen in 1949 during the Civil War. But fortunately, the ROC forces were able to beat back the Chinese and keep it as part of Republic of China. So this is celebrating that victory. So if you go back to Taiwan, here's again the coast of Hsinchu. We're heading up further north. Very windy place, you can see, not too many houses because it's just too windy. But Hsinchu is the home of the Science Park, the Taiwan Economic Miracle, which is steel and petrochemicals, but also obviously high tech and semiconductor chips and all sorts of things. Taiwan's been very successful economically. It's one of the 4 Asian tigers, still doing very well economically. So here's a park in Hsinchu. There's many parks there. And you can take a train line. The Neiwan line goes up, again, up into the mountains, old used in the old days for bringing timber and lumber down from the mountains. And a beautiful area. Here's another beautiful park in Neiwan. So if we head up the coast further, we're back to Danshui. Here's Fisherman's Wharf, nice place in Danshui. So we've now completed the circle around Taiwan back to Taipei. So Danshui is very famous for its sunsets. And here's the sunset at Danshui. And that concludes my presentation. So I don't know if there's any questions. I hope my audio is on.
Yeah, I'm just unmuting myself. Thank you so much, Scott. That was wonderful. See if we
Very
can.
interesting.
If anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask.
What's going on politically right now?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah. So my stepmother in Michigan keeps worry. I guess there's a lot of news reports. I mean, I think the tensions are rising right now with China. As I was telling James before, Zoom is not very popular in Taiwan. The government doesn't like it because they feel it's controlled by Chinese, the government, and they use Zoom is subject to censorship by the Chinese government. So there's, I'd say, rising tensions in terms of the Hong Kong oppression of Hong Kong freedom fighters, or people struggling for freedom in Hong Kong, the Uyghur problem. So a lot of things have, I say tensions are increasing. The South China Sea, China claims all of that as being theirs. It goes all the way down to the Philippines. So that's another source of tension. They've been flying their aircraft into our airspace. So I think this a fairly tense time. I was more nervous in 1996 when we had our first presidential elections, free elections. China fired missiles over Taiwan to try to convince us to vote for the person who was more pro-China, but that didn't work. So I was more nervous in those days than I am now. But still, I would say people are concerned that China is becoming more aggressive, less free.
Unhinged.
So yes, unhinged. The current leaders, I'd say, much more in the style of Mao than perhaps the previous two were. Like Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, I think, were more open to the world. The current fellow is a bit more old style. So I'd say it's higher tension, and so we're very thankful we have our Air Force there and good ties with the United States. The United States and Taiwan have very close relationships, and I hope we can keep it that way. But the democracy is still doing pretty well. Of course, you always have trouble internally, but people disagreeing on things. But I think generally it's fairly peaceful domestically.
Scott, with China claiming all of the South China Sea as their territory, is that causing any problems for Taiwan in terms of getting exports and imports in and out?
No, because our ports are on the east, the Gaochong at the bottom and Keelung at the tops. I mean, so that's okay. I think it's more of a problem for the Philippines lately because basically China's taken these islands and they said, we're not going to militarize them, but they militarized them. They put airstrips in. So the Philippine fishermen can't go to their own islands anymore because China says, these are our islands now, you're not welcome. So they've pretty much, it's more of a problem, I say, for the Philippines. For Taiwan, the main problem is that they have been sending in their military aircraft into our airspace and we have to keep scrambling to intercept them, which creates tensions, but it doesn't, that's all they've been able to do in terms of incursions on the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan also claims some of the islands, so there is tensions there, but it doesn't affect us as much as I'd say Philippines is more economically affected.
Okay.
What's your long-term view of that whole situation?
Williams on this call, maybe. My view is I don't think the people of Taiwan are that worried. The stock market is doing very well. The currency is doing very well because although China is much bigger, to take over a very large place like this would be very difficult, really. I mean, you could maybe defeat the military, but how do you actually take over the place? So I don't think it's very likely. my hope, and I think this will eventually happen, is there'll be some change in China. I mean, not under the current president, but he's not that young. Hopefully maybe the next president will take a different view of the relationship with Taiwan. And eventually, I think China will change but it's hard to say, but eventually that will be more allowed to be free, I hope. I don't know if William has a different opinion, but obviously it's hard to say because China seems very intent on taking us back. Well, not taking, yeah, they view us as a renegade province that's part of China, and they want to take us over. But to do that would be very difficult. But hopefully we need the United States, I think, my personal opinion, to be there as a strong backup to make sure that we're safe and remain free. I hope that continues. That's why the presidential elections are very important in Taiwan. There's always a lot of news coverage because Taiwan depends a lot on the United States for its protection.
The Chinese still list you as a possession of theirs?
Yes, so they view any map, if you look in even the dictionaries, they pressure the dictionaries, Taiwan is considered part of the communist China by them, and they force the rest of the world to say the same thing. So they still claim it as a part of China. It's very complicated because as I said, in 2011, when the Qing dynasty fell, Taiwan wasn't part of China, but yeah, they claim it as a province of China.
The UN still doesn't recognize Taiwan as a separate country, do they?
That's right. No. So in the 1970s, we were replaced by the People's Republic of China. Taiwan's not in the United Nations. We're not in the WHO, the World Health Organization, which has been a big problem during this pandemic. We think we could contribute more, but China won't let us join very, very few organizations that Taiwan is a member of because of China's pressure. No, we're not in the United Nations. And we're not in most organizations, really. So we're a strange status. But we are in a couple, but under the name of Chinese Taipei. We're in the Olympics now. But Chinese Taipei, if you hold up a Taiwan flag at the Olympics, the Chinese will be extremely angry. So if we win a medal, you won't see the Taiwan flag, you'll see the Olympic flag. It's unfortunately.
Do you fear for your long-term safety?
No, I mean, again, I think it's just, I was more fearful in 1996, yeah, than I am now, because that was a very time of upheaval. I just think it just seems to me unlikely that China would do something so awful as to, there's 23 million people here, to attack Taiwan. And it's not easy. Luckily, we're an island. We're not attached by land. So they have missiles, obviously, but to do that would be very difficult. I just think you couldn't do something like that. It'd be too awful.
It's interesting.
That many people.
It's interesting, Scott. It's Dan here in Australia, and certainly Australia's relationship with China is incredibly strained at the moment because our government essentially called China out, in relation to the whole COVID pandemic, and asked for an independent, review as to the causes of it, which they got their backs up about fairly significantly, even though they claim they had nothing to do with it. But what that essentially has done is it's led to a lot of talk here in Australia, around the status of Taiwan and if China, with its regular incursions into your airspace, continues that and sort of ups it from rhetoric to actual actions, and the United States does step in, Australia is essentially obligated to step in as well under our alliance with the United States. So it's really interesting. And in fact, I was just reading an article this morning that was talking about, what happens if China decide to attack Australia. Certainly there's been some rhetoric in the last few days about whether or not they may undertake airstrikes on Australia with long-range missiles and so forth. So I think they're just trying to scare everybody, into submission. But there's certainly certainly a lot of talk about it, and basically what they're saying, what the experts are saying now, is that whilst they would never probably try to step foot in Australia, they'd probably try and choke off our trade routes, i.e., sea lanes and so forth. So, they're certainly angry. Whether or not it actually, results in anything more than rhetoric is yet to be seen, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're more vulnerable in that sense because we're an island. We need shipping and planes to survive. So, yeah, I get it. But the treaty with the United States also includes any type of embargo if China tries to close off our ports and airports. The United States, it's written very vaguely, but it's
there. Yeah.
Interpreted that America should intervene if China tries to do something like that. But it's not a hard, fast treaty. It's written in between kind of way. But we hope that the United States would protect Taiwan, because and Japan also is very interesting, feels very threatened, I think, by China as well. And there are disputes between Japan and China over quite a few islands. So Japan has a fairly large military and also supports Taiwan very much, as does Korea. So we have a lot of friends in the region, which is good. Philippines should be one, but they're
a bit wishy-washy. Yeah.
Wishy-washy now. Yeah, their leader is not the strongest fellow. Yeah.
I read
But they're getting a new one soon.
I read an article sometime last year, I think it was, that even though Japan, their military is defined as nothing but a defense force, if China did take any military actions toward Taiwan, Japan would then consider that actually an attack on their sovereign country as well. And the article was saying that in that situation, that the rules that they have been set up for the Japanese military to be, just purely defense, would then go into play also in defense of Taiwan. So, as you said, there are a lot of countries in the region that, if Taiwan was threatened, that I think would jump in and really kind of put a foot at China, saying, look, you're not just going up against one little country.
Yeah, and the islands go very close to Taiwan. Taiwan is that island chain from Japan down to Taiwan is all one chain. So they have some islands that they claim that are just as close to Taiwan on the east side as China is on the west side. So they're geographically speaking, Japan is next to Taiwan from that on the eastern side. And their military, although they're officially pacifist, but from what I understand as well, the military is quite capable and strong. And then in the south, Vietnam is also squabbling with China over the same island. So China doesn't have many. There's a lot of people who don't like to see China doing what it's doing.
They're kind of ticking off everybody in the neighborhood.
Yes. And except the Philippines, they kind of bought, I won't say that. Anyway, the Philippines is it, but now lately the Philippines is also expressing, taking a different tack, because they're very upset by China saying your fishermen can't come to your own islands because we control them now. Finally, the president of Philippines seems to be waking up to what he's fallen into and saying, no, we can't give up our sovereignty over our own islands. So hopefully the Philippines is changing as well.
Well, I think the largest attractiveness of you to China is your economic might, which in turn then becomes the biggest deterrent worldwide for them to try anything.
Yeah, because I think you could argue that the only reason the Communist Party kind of stays there without much trouble is because people become wealthy under the last few years. And well, partly they're good at controlling media and local information, but I think also if the economy doesn't do well, that would be a big threat to their own standing. So I just wouldn't think they would want to take that risk of having their whole regime come down, because of trouble with the whole world. But we'll see. I hope that's the case.
Yeah, I do too.
But yeah, it's tenser now than a long, long time, unfortunately. Yeah, it's too bad. And it seems over a silly, well, to me, well, I shouldn't say that, but it seems there's such an obvious resolution here just to say Taiwan's on its own, but they won't do that.
No.
So we have a strong army, actually. Well, we hope it's supposed to be stronger, but we have Air Force, Navy, kind of army. So we do have a lot of military assets of our own as well.
Yeah. Very interesting.
But yeah, Australia's, I've been in the news lately too. You know, they've been standing up to China very strongly. The Europeans, not so much, I don't know, but I hope they come along too. Germany, it would be helpful, I think, if Europe was more, but you know, the problem is I think Germany has so much investment in China that they're a bit reluctant to stand up to China, but we'll see.
Well, and then you've got that loose alliance between China and Russia as well. And of course, Russia borders European states, and yeah, it all becomes very, very difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Scott? Nope. Scott, I have a quick one. Your bike that you had, do you bike people, obviously not all the way around the island, but do you just take people out on tours on that?
Well, no, actually, I don't. I never. Whenever I go anywhere, if I'm on a bike, it's rented there.
Oh, okay.
I don't take one with me. But I travel by train everywhere.
Okay.
But no, I don't know. I never. No, I never. I usually travel by myself.
Cool. Well, hopefully one day we'll all get out and come visit, and you can look around.
But you can get around by train very well. The only thing is the system's a little difficult to use, but if you can get the tickets and know where to go, it goes to a lot of places. They have good public transportation in Taiwan with trains and light rail and bicycle rentals, that type of thing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing the presentation.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Yeah.